In today's video, we will be addressing a common comment that I get in my comment section, and that's, "Hey Funk, I'm coming into your type of industry there, and I'm going to be working on hydraulics, and I need to know what kind of hydraulic tools I'm going to need." That and the other one would be, "Hey, how do I get into your industry?" Well, we'll answer that one at the end of the video for you people who like to get into things. And yeah, so we're just going to do a little show and tell. I've been working on hydraulics since 2000, so do the math, what, 24, going on 25 years. And yeah, I've accumulated just about every tool that, as far as what I do, I need to get the job done on a daily basis. We're not going to be getting into basic hand tools. I mean, I'm going to assume that you already have a set of combo wrenches, screwdrivers, things like that. Things that you would start off just basically as a mechanic in general. Depending on where you're coming from, you should already have that to begin with. And we're just going to talk specifically about tools that I would use on a daily basis for hydraulic repairs. Now, some of these tools I've had for years. I don't necessarily have a link for as far as where you could get them from. Some of the tools I've recently replaced or upgraded or added to my collection. Those stuff, if I can, I'll find you links for them, so that way there you could find them if you need them. But yeah, not much to say about the rest of that. So let's point the camera down, and I'll show you my little collection of hydraulic tools. So let's start off with one of the most common repairs you're going to find doing hydraulic work, and that's replacing hoses. And to replace hoses, I mean, again, aside from what would be, considered, your common combo wrenches, crow's foot wrenches are very helpful when it comes to that. Now, this particular set down here in the red case, I bought these at a consignment shop years and years ago. I think I paid $50 for the entire set. They're branded MIT. Goes from 1.1/16 all the way up to 2 inches. Really don't use too much of these down here nowadays. When I was doing construction equipment, these were more readily used just because it's bigger stuff, bigger equipment. But yeah, I mean, for the big wrenches, you could spend the extra money for the fancy name brand stuff, but I've used these over 20 years and never had a problem with them. And then you're getting into the smaller stuff, which I would consider more of your day-to-day type use. This particular set I have here, I think I got like 4 snap-on ones, which, if I'm being honest, these 4 snap-on crow's foot probably cost as much as this set and the ones that are sitting over here. But yeah, the snap-on ones, they're nice, but again, my personal opinion, when you get above an inch, the precision really isn't needed. But yeah, so I mean, basically what you're looking at with a crow's foot wrench is, more often than not, you'll have a hose that needs to be replaced. It's stuffed onto a manifold. You can't get just a regular combination wrench in there because there's all these hoses sticking out here, and you kind of got to get in between them. So yeah, the crow's foot wrench, you just kind of stick in there, give her a little bit of twist, and usually with hydraulic fittings, they're straight thread, and once you crack them loose, you can just spin them off by hand. Now, just the standard crow's foot wrenches, you're looking at, usually a set will take you from like 7/16, 3/8. You metric guys, you can do the math, but yeah, usually 7/16 up to a 1 inch. I know Icon over at the Harbor Freight sells a set of crow's foot wrenches that actually kind of look nice. But yeah, I mean, something like that would be just fine for you. Like I said, most of the time, hydraulic fittings, I mean, they have oil going through them, so usually you don't get too much corrosion. You get some in caustic environments where you'll run into where you really got to be reefing on them. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, it's just crack it loose and then spin it off by hand. Now, another thing that you might need getting into hydraulics, and I mean, this is more for like fuel lines and things like that, but a good set of crow's foot, well, a good set of flare knot wrenches is good for one, but a good set of crow's foot flare knot wrenches are even better. This is brand, did I buy this set off a Snap-on? Oh, I did. Wow, I must have been feeling rich that week. But yeah, it doesn't have to be Snap-on, but pretty much any set of flare knot wrenches would be helpful. Now, talking more of a traditional style wrench, we have some thin profile angle wrenches and stubby wrenches. Now, as far as stubby wrenches go, and I know someone's going to ask me, these here little carabiner rings, I got these from Harbor Freight years ago. Last time I was in there, I was looking for them just so I give you guys a product number, but I don't know if they sell them anymore. But yeah, they're awesome for holding all your wrenches together if you can find them. Like I said, I can't necessarily find them. But back on topic, as far as stubby wrenches go, let's get one off of here. Again, this is a cheap Chinesium set. It says it right there by the logo. MIT again. MIT is just another one of those Chinese brands that just slaps their brand on everything. And yeah, and I'm pretty sure they actually sell these at Harbor Freight as well. But yeah, for stubby wrenches, again, anything with hydraulics, usually with the bigger machines, I mean, you're gonna have multi-functions running off of stuff, and it's coming out of a manifold, and it's a tight area, and sometimes you just need just a smaller wrench. Again, once you crack it loose, it's usually at least hand tight. So crack it loose with a big wrench, and then you get the little stubby in there, and you just kind of work it back and forth, and you have plenty of clearance. I mean, it's a 1-inch that pretty much fits in your hand. Now, as far as angle wrenches go, again, these are low profile ones, which might be different than the ones you have, but you're looking, we got a 1-inch here. It just gives you another angle to get on a fitting that's in a tight spot. The angle down here is your standard, I'm not sure what degree that is, but it's your standard offset for a wrench. But then down here you get another angle, and I've had situations where, you know, quarter turn this way, turn it, quarter turn that way, and then turn it again, quarter turn, just to get the thing loose, and it makes for a nice afternoon when you're turning a quarter turn at a time. But yeah, they're good for that. And another nice thing, like I said, these are low profile. I believe that's a 3/4, and it just kind of gives you a little bit of a thinner profile there for when you got to put like a backup wrench. This would be a Parker fitting, so you have your main wrench on here, and is that the right size? Yeah, that is the right size. Now these particular fittings, they have the little collar on them, so you got plenty of wrench to get a normal wrench on them. But I mean, a lot of fittings, you'll look at them, they'll just be like this, where if you put a regular size wrench on it, you're not going to be able to turn the swivel end of it because it's too wide. So the low profile comes in handy, where you can just kind of stick her on there and still turn this. So you got your backup wrench on here, and then you got your wrench on here, torquing everything down. And that's important too, because when you start torquing these guys down, the hose likes to twist, and you really shouldn't excuse me, you really shouldn't leave a twist into a hydraulic hose. It'll just cause it to wear out faster and give you leaks, and then you'll end up having to do it again, which is embarrassing. Now, if you are doing hoses, you are going to need to plug said hoses in the machine when you take the hoses off, unless you want to leave a big old mess on the floor. And this is kind of more equipment specific for me, and I think for the most part in the United States, the most common hydraulic fittings that we use would be JIC, which stands for Joint Industry Council, which is a 37-degree flare fitting. Now, in my work truck, I got a big old box full of different fittings and caps and all that jazz that I've collected over the years. And I noticed the other day that I only had 2 number 4s that were left, which is one of my more common fittings that I use on a day-to-day basis. And I'm always used to looking at prices in hydraulic shops, which are, outrageously high. So I looked on Amazon. I'm like, hey, let me see if I can find some number 4 JIC fittings, and I found this entire kit for $50. And here, I'll open it up. It includes 12 number 4s. How awesome is that? 10 number 6s. We got 6 number 8s. 4 10s. And 2 12s and 2 16s for $50. How can you beat that? I don't know how you could. But yeah, basically these are great just for, you got a hose, or you pull a hose off, and while it's dripping, you quick put the thing on so you're not standing in a puddle of oil. And if you got to walk away from the machine and get a hose made, you got a plug on that thing so it's not constantly dripping oil while the customer's waiting for you to come back. And yeah, that's just basically what it is, just a cap and a plug. And right there's your 37-degree flare, and that's a number 6 right there. So yeah, you just screw that on there, give it a little snug, and the thing's not going to leak on you while you're working, while you're getting your parts. I will say with this little kit, it's got this closed foam in here. We'll see how long that holds up to greasy, dirty, oily hands. That's one thing. If you're working on hydraulics, you're going to have a lot of greasy, dirty, oily hands. But I mean, you know, if I'm a gentleman about it, when I'm done with them, I hit them with a little brake clean and wipe them down with a shop towel. It should be all right. Now, one thing that I found in recent times, like I said, JIC is the most common that I see. I do occasionally get some metrics. I do have a decent selection of the seal face O-ring, flat face O-ring plugs and caps. But you know, occasionally I run into something with coming out of Korea or Europe, and I don't have a cap or a plug for it. And I recently found these guys, which are just these little teeny tiny nylon plugs. And I mean, of course, they don't hold any pressure, but you pull the hose off, you're like, ah, crap, I don't have a plug for that, and it's just dripping all over the place. You just kind of get this here little cap, and you get the right size. I probably had the right size to begin with, like this little red guy right here, and then you just kind of nike it in there, and I mean, it'll at least keep it from dripping while you're getting the hose made up. So that's about it as far as capping off the lines. And now the next most common thing you're going to run into as far as working on hydraulics, as far as the repairs go, would be hydraulic cylinders. You're going to need to take those apart, which is where we're starting off with here. This is a Blue Point AFS 484B, made in the USA. I would call this a pin spanner wrench, and basically you would take this, stick it into the front of the cylinder where the chrome rod comes out. If there's 2 little pins there, you get this on there, give it a little bit of a reef, and if you're lucky, it'll spin off. This would be just a hook style that would hook onto the side of the cylinder. Everyone makes different cylinders their own different way, and like I said, you could have a million of different options for taking them apart. Again, my most common would be the pin spanner. Also, a nice, I think my dad actually gave me this one. This is a Rigid E110 little angle wrench. Yeah, I mean, opens up, you know, if the cylinder has flats on it, you can just grab onto those flats. And of course, you know, a decent set of adjustable wrenches. Mine, I mean, this is probably a 10-inch. I go from 6 inches all the way up to 24 inches. Now, all that is the official by the book way to take cylinders apart. Again, these pin spanners, probably the most common thing I run into. They make them in all different shapes and flavors. These ones work the best for me. But if I'm being honest, when it comes down to pulling cylinders apart, if the gland is external, nothing beats a good set of pipe wrenches. Now, these particular pipe wrenches, these are Snap-on, made by Baco. If you didn't know, I'm actually thinking about doing another video buying the Baco version of these and comparing them to the Snap-on ones to see if they're the same thing. They basically are. These are absolutely the top dog pipe wrenches I've ever owned in my entire life. These things grab on and they do not let go. They are monsters. Again, rebranded. I did a video not too long ago on Snap-on's rebrand. These are Baco, which Snap-on rebrands under their name. But yeah, you just kind of put the old wrench on the end of the gland there and just reef away. A little tip as far as taking cylinders apart, if you can crack the gland loose before you take the barrel off the end of it, because that big old pin that's holding that barrel on is the best vice that you'll ever find. Sometimes you don't have that option, but yeah. And yeah, these actually say made in Sweden, so yeah. But yeah, like I said, 9 times out of 10, the first thing I'm grabbing for is the big old pipe wrench to crack the gland loose. And yeah, it makes it ugly, but a little bit of sandpaper and a little bit of spray paint makes it look like you've never been there. And if it's still a little tight, sometimes they'll put Loctite on those glands, and if you do that, I hate you. But yeah, if I gotta wrench it all the way out instead of swinging this big wrench, I'll crack it loose with the pipe wrench. Then I'll put the pin spanner on it, and then just kind of work it out by hand. But, yeah, that's about as far as taking them apart. Now, once you have said cylinder apart, you're going to need to replace the seals, right? And one thing, I've had these for years, again, Snap-on. And these are basically just O-ring seal removers. These are great. People always ask me where I get these from. Not everyone has access to a Snap-on truck. I'll give you the number off the thing, if I could read it. It's PAK 562770 is the name if you got a Snap-on truck. And again, these are great for what they are. And then I have a nice pick set, always comes in handy, which these are Blue Point, and these are garbage, just so you know. Reason being is that the little handle here comes off, which stinks, especially when you're prying on something, and they screw in, which also stinks, because a lot of the times if you're got a hook in something, you're trying to pry out an O-ring, you're twisting it, and then the handle turns, and then you get angry, and then you have to tighten it back up. So for these two, I actually found alternatives for you guys. I just recently picked up off of a purchase off of Amazon, so let me grab those. And that would be these two collections from Mayhew. This one would be the 4-piece O-ring remover tool, and their pick set. Alright, well, that's them out of the package there. First set we got is the pick set, which is made by Mayhew. 13091 is the model number for them. Made in America. And like I said, I did kind of look at these. One thing you're looking for with a decent pick set, if you're just buying them off the shelf, one, you want to make sure they have give, but they don't bend to the point where they're going to hold. I mean, I could bend these in half if I wanted to, but you kind of know what I'm talking about as far as feel goes. And two, you want to make sure that they don't twist out of the handle, because again, if you're using like this right angle jobby and you're stuck down inside something trying to pry something out, you don't want it to spin on the handle. Now, these particular ones, I kind of get a magnet on here to feel, see if I can feel about how far it goes in, and I can kind of feel it. So yeah, I mean, it goes about halfway up into the handle, so that's pretty decent. Now, what you would use these for, basically what you want to use a pick for, I mean, you can use it for O-rings. We'll get into why you want to use them for this, but occasionally you'll get, like, you got a cylinder apart, it's a pretty crusty guy, and it's got some residue inside one of the sealing areas or sealing notches, like inside the cup seal. You'll get a bunch of gunk in there, and you kind of just get that, and you get into the corner and you scrape that out, because you want, whenever you're doing any kind of hydraulic work, when you're putting it back together, you want it as clean as possible, so you don't introduce a potential leaking spot where the oil can seep around the old seal there. Now, getting into the Mayhew O-ring remover tools. These particular ones are 60028 is the model number on them. And what makes these important, basically, if you could see it, the tip there, everything is nice and rounded off, so as to not scratch anything. They say O-ring removers, but these are just basically seal removers, is what I would call them. And yeah, you can kind of just get into the area there. Now, the reason you'd want these over a sharp pick like this to remove seals is because this is less likely to actually scratch the surface. Because if you get anyone who's had a cup seal or a a lip seal on the end of a cylinder. You kind of jab it in there, and you want to pry it out. Now, if you had a sharp pick like this, or even a flathead screwdriver with two sharp ends on it, when you're prying in there, you could actually put a gouge inside of it, which would again give the oil a path to leak around the seal. Whereas with this, I mean, you can gouge up material with these, but like I said, just a rounded off end on the thing makes it a lot less likely to happen. And as far as the shaft goes on these, we're looking right about there. So you got a lot of metal inside the handle. And again, with these, you're kind of looking for that spring steel feel to them, like you will with the picks. And again, if I wanted to, I could bend it in half, but you're kind of getting the feel for it. And again, you got the two different angles for if you're kind of going in and scooping out of like inside of a cylinder, and then just the regular old straight shot. Nice long one for if you got to go deep, and a nice short one for, I would say, more for like cylinders and stuff like that. But yeah, seem like they're decent enough. And while we're on the topic of repacking cylinders, this is a particular tool I knew about for a long time, and I just never bought it, just being cheap. And once I bought it, I'm like, oh wow, I should have bought that a long time ago. And that's basically a cup seal installer. And without getting too far deep into the woods, you just basically put the cup seal inside here, and then you take the handles, you flip it around, and it makes it smaller. You stick it down in a hole, you remove the handles, and then the cup seal's in there. Normally you got to get your little pry bar in there and kind of poke the seal into place. But yeah, these are a godsend, especially with smaller cylinders, especially on cold days where the seals are really hard and not wanting to cooperate with you. And I wish I bought a set of these a long time ago. This is the medium sized one. I have one that does bigger, and I have one that does smaller. So the bigger one, usually with cup seals, if you got one that's that big, they're pretty easy to get in. But yeah, the medium and the smaller ones, this comes in pretty handy. Now, getting into the diagnostic end of things. One thing to keep in mind, up until this point, the diagnostic was that there's a leak, repair it. Now we're kind of getting a little deeper into the woods. That would be gauges. Now, for field repairs and of the like, gauges is pretty much what you're going to use. I mean, you got all kinds of expensive stuff, flow gauges, things like that. Like I said, they're expensive, and you're probably not going to use them all that often, so I really don't necessarily know if I would bother buying them unless you're doing them all the time. It's a lot of money. But yeah, like I said, these are just my collection over the years. That's a new one that I haven't taken out of the package yet, that was given to me by my work. And some companies actually give you this stuff for this because it's kind of specific to hydraulics, and they want you to have the good stuff. And some of these I bought, some of them were given to me, some of them I found, But yeah, and I mean, basically what they work is this particular one. When I was doing construction equipment with Genie, would be the one that comes to mind off the bat. Quick disconnect. You plug this into the manifold, then you can check your pressures on the gauge. This particular one, I'm not 100% sure what it was for, but it's a screw-in style with a jam nut. Hold it in place so you can read it. This would probably be a more common one. I believe this is probably even the style that Toyota uses on their forklifts. And this one, again, you just plug it in, screw it down, lock it up, and you're good to go. One thing, just as a safety precaution, try not to plug these in while there's pressure on them. I mean, one will be really hard to plug it in, and two, you might make a mess. And when you're picking the hydraulic gauge that you're actually going to be using, if you're looking for 2,500 psi on the gauge, you get yourself a 5,000 psi gauge, just because gauges and pretty much anything is most accurate in the middle, and it gives you a little wiggle room. If it spikes out to 4,000 psi and you got a 3,000 psi gauge that you're trying to read 2,500 psi on, you're going to wreck the gauge. Whereas you got a 5,000 gives you a little wiggle room for a little fudge factor. But yeah, I mean, like I said, this is just a bunch of, we got some pneumatic gauges in here, some fittings and whatnot. One thing I will say too, for you guys that are starting off, if you come across any fittings that you find while you're working on stuff that you don't have a use for, or you ordered it to replace it because you weren't sure about it, take the old one and throw it in a bin. All that stuff will come in handy and get your butt out of a bind at some point in time in the future when you least expect it. But yeah, that's about it for Diag. And last but not least, we'll qualify this under pro tip, and that would be get yourself a cheap assorted color zip tie set. Reason being, if you're working on a manifold and you got to remove 4 hoses to get to the one that you actually need to replace, and you want to make sure they end up back where they started off, you get these here different color zip ties, and you pull it out of the package there. You stick it on the old fitting there, and then you stick it on the corresponding fitting onto the manifold, and you know exactly where that hose goes back. Now, most of the time with hydraulic hoses, especially ones that have been sitting in the same spot for a while, they kind of get a memory, so you kind of get a feel for where they were. But like I said, this is the absolute 100% foolproof way of making sure that hose goes back to where it took it off. And yeah, I mean, I've seen guys put tape on them and then they mark them. Other guys use the stuff for marking wires, which is just basically tape with numbers on it, and all that stuff will come off with a lot of hydraulic oil and or brake clean, which is what you're using all the time. And this is 100% the foolproof way to make sure that hose gets back where it came from, and then you're not guessing. When you pull the lever, it goes in the opposite direction now because you flip the hoses. So yeah, this is definitely what I like to do whenever I'm pulling multiple hoses off in a tight location. And if they're if they're all right where they are and they're not interfering with anything, I just leave them on there so the next guy has the benefit. So there we go. That is what I would consider the basic hand tools that you are going to need to service hydraulic equipment out in the field. It doesn't matter if you're working on pallet jacks where it has one little teeny tiny cylinder in it, all the way up to something like a full-size cat excavator. The only difference is the size of the tools you're going to need. The basics are pretty much the same. And like I said in the video, it depends on what you're working on. If you're not working on equipment, if you're not working for a dealership that has equipment that uses JIC fittings, you're not going to need that JIC cap and plug kit. You're going to need whatever cap and plug kit goes with that type of equipment that you're working on. And yeah, my hands are dirty. That's what happens when you do videos on tools that you already own that you use. But yeah, I think that's about it. So now, from now on, when someone asks me that question, I can just refer them to this video, and I don't have to type out a whole bunch of stuff. It'll save me some time in the future. But yeah, I think that's about it as far as the tools go. And to address the other comment that I always get, which is how do I get into the material handling industry as far as repairs go, or forklift repair? How do I get into that? It's basically there's no forklift school to go to, as far as I know. I mean, like a generic forklift school. There's a few equipment repair schools out there. I don't know how much that's going to help you. I'm sure it's worth something, but yeah, I mean, we pretty much just hire people with mechanical backgrounds from. Mostly, we get guys from the automotive industry, and yeah, I mean, those guys love it. I mean, forklifts, as far as you're not dealing with the general public. It's production equipment, so there's less pickiness as far as pricing goes. You get cheap customers every once in a while, but for the most part, if it's a production piece of equipment, the forklift's down, it needs to be running for the guy to make money, and price isn't necessarily the main motivator as far as getting their stuff done. And then two, I mean, it's equipment. It's not meant to be necessarily pretty. So, with a car, you got that fender, designer wanted the fender to match up with the hood in a certain way, and just because of that, now it's going to take you 4 hours to replace an alternator because it needed to look a certain way on the outside. You don't get that too much with forklifts because it's built to do a certain job, and it doesn't need to look good. But yeah, like I said, most of our guys are coming from automotive, construction. I mean, we've even had a couple of guys that were just kind of handyman wrench type guys, and we bring them in. We give you the training. You learn how to spin oil filters and grease stuff and do all your checks, and your training progresses throughout time, and you move up in the ranks. I mean, that's basically how I started, but I did it from the construction end and kind of moved my way over. I got into construction equipment because I was really good at fixing lawn and garden equipment. And then, you know what I memean? I moved my way up from that. But yeah, I mean, show up on time and sober, we'll work with you. That's pretty much how it is nowadays with any of the trades. But yeah, so I think it's going to be a long one. That was a lot of stuff we had to discuss there. But anybody who stuck around this long, you're awesome for dealing with this face for as long as you had to. Again, I'll put my links down in the things for the stuff I have links for. If you want to check them out, go ahead. And if not, you could use those for references for stuff you could buy anywhere else. And yeah, I think that's about it. Questions, comments, concerns, leave them down in the old comment section. I'll do my best, as always, to get back to you. I'd like to thank you for watching. There you go.